Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank Dean Khairat Kanchanakarun for addressing the conference summary. On behalf of Chiang Mai University, I am very pleased to support the International Conference on Asian Economic Development, or AED. The university believes that this conference will be the driving force to promote Chiang Mai University as a university of excellence, especially in advanced research with impact at the regional and global scale. Chiang Mai University is pleased that AED conference has been a strong academic platform not only for the academics in Thailand but also around the world. The university is happy to promote and support the conference further with the participants of world-leading researchers in the field of economic development. The conference could be the hub of advanced knowledge in economic development. Moreover, the participants of young scholars is the promising signs of the development of future talented researchers. The university believes that the collaboration between educational institutes and private sector is a vital aspect to the research and development in order to make this impact of economy to Asia. Last but not least, I would like to thank the scientific committee, the administrative committees, and staff who have worked tirelessly to make this conference meet the international standard and extend research collaborations. I wish all of you enjoy the conference as well as your stay in Chiang Mai, and hopefully you have a chance to explore our Lanna culture. I declare the conference officially open. Thank you very much.
Thanks for marvelous message from Professor Phongrat. And now may I invite Professor Dr. Phongrat Sivandipongkol to present our keynote speaker with a token of appreciation. May I call on stage Professor Phongrat, please. Next, I would like to invite all distinguished delegates and invite speakers to join a group photo on the stage.
It is now my great pleasure to introduce Professor Farhad Chakisarehesari, the keynote speaker of the Asian Economic Development Conference 2018. Professor Farhad Chakisarehesari is a faculty member and assistant professor of economics at the Faculty of Political Science and Economics, Waseda University, Japan. In addition, he is a senior assistant to the Dean of the Asian Development Bank Institute, or AED2018, and visiting professor of economics at Keio University, Japan.
Professor Farhad Chakisarehesari obtained his PhD degree in energy economics from Keio University. He was a visiting scholar and visiting professor at several institutions and universities, such as the Institute of Energy of Economic of Japan or IEEJ, Credit Risk Database CRD, Association of Japan and Graduate School of Economics of University of Tokyo. He has published on a wide range of topics, including oil and energy economics, green finance, small and medium-sized enterprise, monetary policy and banking. Moreover, he authored more than 40 journal papers and book chapters, including editorship of 6 books. Everybody, please join me in welcoming Professor Farhad on stage.
Professor Dr. Pongrat, Professor Dr. Hayrat, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure and honor to be here today. And first of all, I would like to express my thanks to Chiang Mai University for inviting me to this prestigious event. As kindly introduced by the coordinator, I'm from Waseda University. Let me introduce a little bit Waseda University. Waseda University is one of the oldest private universities in Japan, established in 1882. Presently, Keio University and Waseda University are two top private universities in Japan. At this moment, we have more than 50,000 students, and we are so much interested. Japanese university, including Waseda University, are interested in accepting and admitting international students. In this year, we admitted about 8,000 international students from different universities. As for alumni, Waseda University is among the top universities in Japan. 7 prime ministers of Japan and CEOs of several companies such as Sony, such as Panasonic, or even non-Japanese companies. The chairman and CEO of Samsung graduated from Waseda University. We will be happy to start cooperation, collaboration with Chiang Mai University and accept exchange students. So today I'm going to talk about renewable energy, green energy, from the financing aspect of it. As you know, in line with SDG, with Sustainable Development Goals, promoting clean energy is one of these goals. And on the other hand, one of the challenges, one of the main challenges for development of renewable energy, green energy, is difficulties that we have for accessing finance for promotion of these. So today I would like to explain about these challenges and define these challenges and provide solution, practical solution that work in other countries and we hope also be workable in Thailand. So the reference of my today presentation is from this book that presently I'm editing on green finance, jointly with Professor Jeffrey Sachs. He's very famous in the field of sustainable development, professor of University of Columbia, and Professor Wu Wing Kai, professor of UC Davis, University of California, Davis, and Professor Yoshino, the Dean of Asian Development Bank Institute. So in this book, that's the editing of it almost finished, and it's now in production process. It will come out in early 2019, but it's now available for pre-ordering in Amazon. So we try to collect 2 groups of papers, thematic papers and country papers. So in country papers, experience of different countries on solutions that they provided, especially from the side of government for easing access to finance highlighted. And before I start my presentation and I talk about topic, at Asian Development Bank Institute, ADBI, which is the think tank and research institute of ADB, and it's based in Tokyo, and I'm also affiliated to this institute. Periodically we have call for papers, call for proposal. These two are the most recent call for papers that we have on energy insecurity, challenges, solution, and renewable energy, and the second one on reforming state-owned enterprises. So from the distinguished speakers, professors, or postgraduate students, especially if you are interested in this topic, because these call for papers are valid until August 30. We will be happy to have your contribution. The output of these two call for papers will be 2 books published by Springer, and in addition to that, we will also have a special issue of top-tier journals for each of them. Okay, so this is outline of my presentation. First of all, answering to this question that why do we need renewable energy? Secondly, challenges that we have for development of renewable energy. One solution is institutional investors for providing long-term investment. Then I will talk about a spillover effect, that what is the spillover effect and how could we utilize the spillover effect in order to promote the investment in renewable energy. And then I will provide another solution, a community-based financing solution called Hometown Investment Trust Fund. And finally, conclusion and policy implication. First of all, why we need to develop renewable energy. This figure is very clear, and as you know, one of the main reasons that we need, that force us to develop renewable energy and green energy is due to environmental issues, environmental impacts that we receive from fossil fuel. So presently, almost 40% of the CO2 emissions, global CO2 emission, is from Asia Pacific, and 60% rest of the world. So in 2013, according to ADB Outlook, 43% of the global demand for electricity will be from Asia Pacific. From this 43%, I mean 64% of this Asia demand is from China and India. On the other hand, in 2030, 89% of the CO2 emission, carbon emission, will be from China, India, and Indonesia, which is equal to, I mean, the amount of it is about almost 32 billion tons of CO2, or 48% of global emission. So this means that globally, this topic is serious, it's very important. And in Asia Pacific, it's more serious. The reason is coming from the energy consumption sources. As it's clear in this figure, almost 89% of the primary energy consumption in Asia Pacific is from fossil fuel, mainly from coal, oil, and natural gas. However, when we are looking at Europe or North America, although coal, oil, gas are also important movers of their economies, but their share of fossil fuel is not as large as in Asia. So these two figures that I showed, they show clearly that how serious is this issue. In order to achieve two sustainable development goals for promoting clean energy, we cannot rely on conventional financing solutions. It means we need to open a new field for financing this sector, or green finance, which are different from conventional financing solutions. Okay, so in order to find a sustainable financing solution, let's look at the financial system, the structure of financial system in Asia. As it's clear, in most Asian countries, or most Asian countries are bank dominant. Almost 80% of the financial system, financial market of People's Republic of China are banks, or banking. And share of capital market, insurance companies, pension funds is just 20%. Or in India, more than 70%. In Thailand, more than 70% of the financial market are banks. In Malaysia, almost 90%. Japan and Korea, they have more developed capital market, but still share of banks are very significant when comparing to Western economies. Many Western economies are more capital market oriented. However, Asia is mainly based on bank loans. On the other hand, when we look at, so it means that all major parts of this financial market are bank. So when we are looking for a financing solution, definitely banks should be the major solution. But when we approach the banks, many banks are reluctant to lend to renewable energy sector. They are not so much interested. So first of all, because of the risk which is associated with renewable energy sector. On the other hand, the second reason is lower rate of return. Rate of return is very important. When we compare renewable energy comparing to fossil fuel, in many cases rate of return is lower comparing to that. On the other hand, another reason is due to the international or domestic banking regulations, Basel capital requirement that limit bank lending to risky sector. So, first of all, lack of long-term financing. Secondly, low rate of return. These are the two major challenges for development of renewable energy sector. Regarding the risk, there are several risks associated with renewable energy. The first one is technology risk, because most of these technologies that we are using in, for example, solar PV, wind, and many other geothermal and so on, so these are new technologies. However, when we are looking at the technologies that we are using, for example, for coal-fired plants, or for oil sector, or for gas sector, many of them back to decades ago. So, for new technologies, from the point of view of financiers, there are some risks associated. The second one is what I mentioned earlier, rate of return, feasibility of these projects, lower rate of return in many of these projects, bankable project or not. Fourthly, many countries started to promote absorbing finance from abroad, from foreign financiers for these renewable energy projects. So the exchange rate risk, which is associated, too much reliance on overseas money will create a burden for country. And many other risks which are associated with these projects and also to other projects, such as political risk, operational risk, maintenance risk, and so on. So, okay, now let's talk about the solutions. As I've mentioned, one of the main challenges is lack of long-term financing. When we are talking about banks as a solution for financing, banks' resources are deposits. Deposits are 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. However, for development of energy project, we need to access to long-term financing. For development of infrastructural project, we need to access to long-term financing, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. So this is one of the reasons that banks are not a suitable solution due to the maturity mismatch that will happen if we allocate banks' resources to long-term financing. Therefore, we need to look for those institutions or those resources that keep long-term money. Pension funds, insurance companies, these are keeping long-term money, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. So because of that, insurance companies and pension funds could provide a suitable solution for long-term finance. When we are looking at OECD countries, institutional investors in OECD countries, they are managing almost 100 trillion US dollar assets under management. That we believe pension funds and insurance companies can provide sufficient amount of money for safer and larger scale green energy projects such as hydropower and so on. Next, let me talk about a spillover effect. That what is a spillover effect and how can we utilize a spillover effect for increasing rate of return in green energy projects. Because the second challenge that I mentioned earlier for development of green energy project is rate of return, lower rate of return. When we are talking about the electricity tariffs are often regulated by governments. In most countries, especially in Asia, almost in all Asian countries, electricity prices or electricity tariffs are not determined by market behavior, however regulated by government. So due to lack of market mechanism, it might be not so much interesting for private sector investment. We are proposing that it is possible to use the spillover effect of energy supply in order to increase the rate of return of green energy projects. But what is a spillover effect and how utilizing it can increase the rate of return of green energy projects? So consider a region which was unelectrified before. Then government introduced a project, a PPP type of project, or completely a private project, that if private sector come, establish an energy infrastructure here and provide energy supply, then after a while, I will return the spillover tax to that private investor. But what does it mean? For example, this region used to be unelectrified. After energy supply, after establishment of a green energy project there, and after energy supply start here, then more businesses will start surrounding that region. More restaurants, more shops, more small and medium-sized enterprises, more manufacturing plants, and so on, due to access to energy. So because of that, the production in that region will be promoted, and government can receive more tax from that region. So that increase in the amount of production in that region and that increase in the amount of tax is called a spillover tax. So we believe it is possible to return a portion of that spillover tax to private sector investors in order to increase the rate of return of that project. So as I mentioned earlier, electricity tariffs are fixed mainly, majorly. So because of that, many private investors are not so much interested. So after the energy supply is started in that region, as I mentioned earlier, due to this spillover effect, the tax in that region will increase. Injection of the portion of that increase in the amount of tax will increase the rate of return of the project. So the actual rate of return of the project will be much higher. So in beginning, the only earning of private sector investor was the user charge or electricity tariff. However, after injection of the tax or after the return of this in a form of transfer to private sector investor is reduced. It is possible to calculate this spillover effect. At Asian Development Bank, we did a project for government of Philippines. So there is another type of infrastructure project, a highway in Philippines which is called STAR. Government had planned for establishment of these projects. And we calculated the spillover production and spillover tax of government. T0 is the year of completion of this project, when this infrastructure built. As it's clear here, T+1 is 1 year after completion of this project. The total amount of government tax that received from this region reduced. However, after 3 years, the amount of tax increased. And in T+4, the amount of tax almost doubled. Because after establishment of this infrastructure, more businesses started in the surrounding region, more restaurants, more hotels, more SMEs, more industrial plants, and so on. So we believe a part of this spillover tax need to be injected or need to be returned to the project in order to increase the rate of return. Next solution is a community-based financing solution. Communities are very important. Social funding, social financing is very important for promotion of especially micro and medium-sized projects in Asia. So this project is called, this new scheme of financing is called Hometown Investment Trust Funds. So this book is available, and if you want to access to this freely, you can download this paper on the ADBI website if you just Google this name. Let me explain that. What does Hometown Investment Trust Fund mean? What is the background and history of it? What is the process of it, and how it can contribute to easing the access to investment and finance? So I think everyone knows about Fukushima nuclear disaster. In March 2011, the great earthquake and the tsunami after that hit coast of Sendai, and after that, due to the damage of Fukushima nuclear power plant, Japan shut down almost all nuclear power plants and substituted this loss with fossil fuels, mainly with coal, with LNG, with oil, and so on. So one of the major reasons behind this nuclear shutdown is that people, especially people who were living in that region, they were opposing nuclear energy due to this, issue. So this figure shows the primary energy, the power generation of Japan is coming from which fuel. As it's clear, in 2014, share of nuclear became almost zero. And on the other hand, LNG and other fossil fuels share increased. So although in the most recent outlook of Ministry of Economy, Trade, Industry of Japan, METI, it showed that in long run, Japanese government has planned for starting nuclear power generation, but by consideration of the safeguards. So, in this paper, we found out that after nuclear shutdown in Japan, after Fukushima nuclear disaster, because of reliance of this economy on fewer fuels, energy security in Japan reduced. On the other hand, in another word, what does it mean? It means that if we want to increase the energy security, diversification of energy is very important. Not just reliance on renewable energy, and not just reliance on fossil fuels. An optimal mixture of these resources that first of all can reduce the emissions and maximize the economic goals, economic development goals, and maximize the energy security in front of this region. So the policy implication of this paper was that in order to increase energy security, Japanese government need to diversify the energy. So we found out that after nuclear disaster, after Fukushima nuclear disaster, almost all energy consuming sectors, such as household sector, such as industrial, commercial, transportation sector, their sensitivity, the elasticity toward oil price fluctuation reduced. So let me give you a simple example. Imagine that I have two different sources of food. Potato, rice. If price of rice increase a lot, then I will shift, because I want to survive, I will shift from rice to potato. However, if there is only one source, only one food, and only potato is existing, if price of potato raise too much, I need to buy because I want to survive. This is the current situation. Reliance on fewer fuel resources will reduce the energy security, and it is important for all countries, especially to those countries which are vulnerable toward energy price fluctuation, especially emerging economies, developing economies, to diversify the energy consumption. Okay, so what does hometown investment trust funds mean, and how these types of funds contributed to promotion of the renewable energy sector in Japan? People who were living in that suffered region in Fukushima and the surrounding area, as I have mentioned, they mentioned that we are opposing nuclear. We are looking for a cleaner and safer resources. However, as mentioned earlier, many banks, they were not interested to lend to this sector and finance this sector. So what did they do? They started to collect communities' money, their own money, $100, $200, $300, a small amount of money that be sufficient for establishment of a project, for example, a solar farm or a wind power generator and so on. Then they could generate electricity. They established a local solar plant and generated electricity. They consumed the electricity that they generated and they sold the excess amount of it to the national power company. So this scheme became successful and very interesting. This type of funds are called hometown investment trust funds that I would like to explain about them. So as mentioned earlier, investments are coming from communities, local people, and a small amount of money, $100, $200, $300. for establishment of a green project, a green energy project, generation of the electricity, consuming the electricity, selling the excess of it to the national power company. And when this project became feasible, then banks will also come. Because, for example, when you approach the bank and they found out that this project is feasible and it's going on, so it's possible. And a portion of the capex which is needed for development of this project, also it's possible to be contributed by government through transfer payments from the, for example, the carbon tax and so on. So this project, this scheme became successful in Japan, and hundreds of funds under this scheme developed. So maybe many of you mentioned that this is a type of a crowdfunding. But what is the main differences between hometown investment trust funds and the conventional crowdfunding? The most important differences is the reason which is behind the investment. In the venture capital, in crowdfunding, the only reason that I have for my investment is profit. I'm looking for profit. However, for those people who were living in Fukushima, in beginning they were not looking for profit. They were looking for a clean energy instead of nuclear power. So, as mentioned here, we believe there is a warm feeling behind this investment, behind hometown investment trust fund, because the investors are sympathizing with the company or with the project. So if I want to give example of hometown investment trust fund, for example, one company which is the operator of these types of projects called Music Securities in Japan, by establishment of 40 funds could collect about 1 billion Japanese yen for establishment of this solar rooftop project in that. Or another company, Secure Energy, again by same financing scheme, by hometown investment trust funds, in another city in Japan, Chino City, collected sufficient amount of investment for this project. Or 249 people, by donation and also investment, they could collect about $2 million for establishment of a wind power generator. Okay, then after government of Japan found out that this scheme is workable and it is interesting, this scheme became a national strategy in Japan. Now one office is working under Prime Minister of Japan, under Prime Minister Abe's office, under this name, in order to use this scheme for other risky sectors that banks and many other financial institutions are not interested to lend. And how does it work? What is the procedure of working there? So the main platform for collection of money is through internet. Some companies that they receive license from government, from financial service agency of the government of Japan, they are eligible for announcement of this project. Imagine, for example, I'm a project owner, I have a plan for establishment of a solar farm, about 1 megawatt in Thailand. Then I introduce this project, I prepare enough documents, feasibility study, my background, that what is my background and so on. Then I approach to that intermediate company or internet company that already received license from FSA, from Financial Service Agency of Japan. And that intermediate company's role is very important. Project assessment is done by this company. Then if that intermediate company found out that I'm eligible and this project is feasible, then we'll introduce this project through internet. Because this project is introduced through internet, so not only people who are living in that hometown, but people of all part of Thailand, or even if, for example, I'm from Chiang Mai originally, but I'm living in US, in abroad. I'm interested in my hometown. I would like to have a sustainable region, a clean region. I check in internet and I donate the money or I invest in that project. Then it's possible to collect money. So as I have mentioned earlier, role of project assessor is very important. For example, one of these project assessor, one of these intermediate companies is, as I mentioned earlier, is Music Security Japan. CEO of Music Security is my friend. I asked him that usually for many of these projects, for these SMEs, micro project, renewable energy project, default risk is high. He mentioned that for his case, the default ratio is less than 1%. How it is possible, as I have mentioned, assessment is very important. Assessment of the project owner and the project by itself. So, as mentioned, Financial Service Agency of the government of Japan, which is the regulator and supervisor of the whole financial system, banks, insurance companies, and capital market, all of them are under FSA, issue license for intermediate company type 2. Intermediate company type 1 are securities companies, investment banks, and so on. So type 2 is under this. However, there are some important points that we need to consider. These types of investments are not guaranteed. Not guaranteed by government and not guaranteed by that intermediate company. On the other hand, or in another word, the Deposit Insurance Corporation of Japan does not provide any guarantee. So it is this issue. At this moment, about 10 companies, 10 intermediate companies, they already received license from government of Japan and from FSA, and FSA is supervising these intermediate companies. And these intermediate companies are doing assessment of the project. So, thanks to this scheme, accessing to micro investment in the green energy sector of Japan eased. In the most recent year, here in this paper, which is one of the chapters of the green finance book, we provided the theoretical aspects. If you are interested, I can send you this paper that how this scheme can promote the investment into renewable energy sector and how injection of tax, carbon tax, into this project as a seed money of the government can increase the rate of return or can reduce the lending rate to these projects. Okay, so finally, I would like to mention the conclusion and the policy implications. First of all, diversification of energy resources, renewable energy and non-renewable. Because, for example, I hear usually we hear from many, especially international organizations, that their outlook for renewable energy sector, in my idea, is too much optimistic. The optimal way or a rational way is diversification by using renewable energy and non-renewable energy. We cannot get rid of the fossil fuel in our energy basket in the short run or medium term. So diversification of energy resources, renewable energy and non-renewable energy is important for energy security and mitigating environmental concerns in Asia Pacific. Too much reliance on overseas finance will create future burden for countries. It means the priority need to circulate the domestic saving rather than relying on foreign money too much. So circulating domestic saving to domestic investment and maximizing non-debt financing, FDI or remittances are key issues. Institutional investors, insurance companies and pension funds are potential long-term investors in renewable energy sector. Utilizing tax revenue or use of a spillover effect of energy project will increase the rate of return, and it's an incentive for private investors. For financing a smaller scale renewable energy project, using micro investment schemes such as hometown investment trust funds, community funds, village funds are very important for collection. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Barnard, for your enlightening presentation. It was so impressive and being the interesting remark. Everybody, now it's time for the question and answer session. In case if you have any question, please don't be hesitate and raise your hand to ask you question to Professor Barnard. Anyone have any question?
Thank you very much for your presentation. It is very interesting. From my personal perspective, the community-based in Japan is very kind of easy to apply community-based activities. Do you have any recommendations to apply this kind of idea to global society to apply this kind of content?
Thank you very much for your good question. This is a question that usually when I present hometown investment trust funds outside of Japan, in different countries, especially developing countries, they usually ask this question. Because the background, the backbone of this scheme is the social capital, which is very important. And the most important thing is trust. How can we trust that project? How can we trust that project owner? Because there is no guarantee for this kind of a scheme. So it is possible and it is applicable for other countries. We have used this scheme in other countries also, in Cambodia, in Vietnam, in Peru, not only in renewable energy, but also in other sectors. And we have now one project in Afghanistan. It is about almost a $30 million project in the energy sector. So it is very important to use the local capacity, especially among those people that they trust each other. Because if one person from outside comes, maybe that community they don't trust. For example, for the case of Afghanistan, for an unelectrified region, we meet them, we explain for them that how much electricity is important for them. If you have access to electricity, the quality of your life, the quality of your business, the amount of your sales will increase. For that case of Afghanistan, AED is going to provide seed money and then collection of money from that community. So As mentioned, it is very important to start this project from a group of people that they trust each other, and then promotion of it to other parts of the country.
Any more questions?
Professor Fahad, I think it's very important about for the investment of renewable energy. In Thailand, I think many projects that if we would like to introduce to the community to create a renewable project, it's very difficult to get the funding from bank. However, in Thailand, the government set up what we call the renewable energy promotion fund, something like that. It belongs to the government, belongs to the Ministry of Energy. So they fund the big projects to government agency like our university. We also get funding from this renewable promotion fund, something like that, to build the plants that we can bring our waste to produce the biogas and then compress it as a CBG, compressed biomethane gas, and then sits in our bus. Or we also can ask for the support from the government to do the solar rooftop. But again, I discussed with many people on this issue, and it's very difficult if we look at the return, because it's very low IRR, something like that. So that's why I think very difficult to get a loan from the bank. However, can you explain more a bit about if we use taxation as the policy to encourage people to use more renewable energy? How can we do that?
Thank you very much, Professor, for your good questions. So, first of all, regarding the carbon taxation, I'm not so much supporting carbon taxation, especially in developing countries, because this will put another, cost pressure, especially for, manufacturing sector and so on. However, for, new ways of funding and the government funding that you have mentioned, because when we are talking about support, usually we expect government to support. Many governments, they have several budgetary issues and so on, so we need to look for non-governmental solutions. So let me divide it into two parts, the financing into two parts. The first part for development of new technologies for renewable energy sector. The second one for development of the project, for example, a solar project and so on. In my idea, if we want to use government financing or government support, it's better that the government support be more in the first phase. It means for development of new technology, subsidies for more R&D in this sector. That comes. So we did one research at ADBI for 6 or 7 countries which are top producers of PV: China, Japan, US, Germany, Korea, Malaysia. What was the key behind their success? Most important thing that we found out was the support that their governments had for the R&D sector. For example, for the case of Korea, there is a company, a state-owned company, a governmental company called KOTEC, Korea Technology Development Company, like that. Or in the Korean language, they say KIBO. The low-interest loans that they provide to manufacturers of PV, solar PV manufacturers, for promotion of new technologies in order to increase the efficiency and reduce the production cost. So, in my idea, government support should be more in this field, and for promotion of the energy project, we need to rely more on private sector money. For example, for the case of solar, there is a very successful case in China, the National Solar Rooftop Project. That, what was the framework? How did it work? This, scheme, the solar and the National Solar Rooftop Project was a type of consignment selling of solar PVs. For example, I am a manufacturer of PV, I sell this solar to you as a household, you install on your roof, and then you need to return in 7 years, in 6 years. You generate electricity, you use the electricity that you are generating, you sell the electricity, and you pay that installment to me. And then after 6 years, 7 years, that you return all back for 20 years, which is the life of this PV system, 10 years, 12 years, this is your assets. So this scheme was so much successful in China, and recently in Japan also, several companies are starting. So this is my suggestion. Carbon taxation is important, however, we shouldn't focus so much on it because it will increase the production cost, also again another burden. We need to provide more incentive plans rather than creating another cost for the manufacturer. Government support be more to the R&D sectors and private sector money for the project development. Thank you very much. No, it's not only for renewable energy. This scheme started from renewable energy sector. However, it expanded to many other sectors. So I didn't put a slide because today I would like to focus more on energy sector and renewable energy. However, in the agricultural sectors, for example, I can send you more information about it. A group of farmers that they have planned for establishment or for promotion of their crop, but they don't have enough access to finance. They approach this intermediate company, they show their background, that we are farmers, we have, for example, 10 years, 20 years of experience, and this is our plan. For example, we need 10 million yen, 20 million yen, and then introducing that project through internet. Then I, as an investor, I'm interested, for example, that Apple, which is from north part of Japan, and it's product of that group, I'm interested. So this warm feeling shouldn't just come from the feeling of belonging to a region, also to a product, also to a group, and so on. So I gave one example, music securities. So why name of this company is Music Securities? This Music Security, they were a group of musicians, guitar players. So they didn't have enough amount of money for promotion of their activities and so on. However, they have a big fan group. They established a fund, they named it Music Securities Fund. Many people were fan of that group. Many of them donated, many of them put money and so on. Then they found out that this scheme is applicable. However, they are still keeping Music Securities name, but they are using it, they expanded it to agricultural sector, to renewable energy, many other sectors. So the support, or the incentives that government is providing is depending on the sector, For example, presently in Japan, agricultural sector is a bottleneck. The efficiency, the productivity in the agricultural sector of Japan is very low. Only 1% of Japanese GDP is agricultural sector, but 2 million people are working in the agricultural sector. So government need to support that sector because of the food security and because of the employment for keeping the income. For example, for the case of agricultural sector, government has some tax exemptions, or government is also providing some low interest loan. So the scheme is, this scheme, depending on the government policy, maybe government return some tax, maybe government exempt tax, maybe government also brings some seed money as very low interest loan or zero interest loan and so on, depending on the policy of the government.
I just have one question, small question. How large is your hometown and how small is your hometown? Because sometimes it would be very difficult to appropriately match between hometown and the required project. Because it's more likely that there's a mismatch between the two. And if you just build up one wind power or two wind powers in your hometown, it may not be very economically efficient.
Thank you very much for your question. So, first of all, when we say hometown, it doesn't mean that the money need to come from the hometown only. As I mentioned, because the project is announcing, is introducing through internet, first of all, for absorbing money, there is possibility that not only from that hometown, but also from a larger region, from the country, or even from abroad, we absorb money. Secondly, for this project, these funds are project-oriented. So it means one fund for one project. And when that project be finished, it means the mission of that fund is also finished. You can introduce another fund for another project in another hometown.
Professor Farhad, are there any documented case studies of these successful hometown projects? Because sometimes in the projects like renewable energy, the gestation period could be very long. But how does the funding work in that case? One. And second, there are many aspects to which there is sustainability dimensions which fall under all these SDGs, especially for developing countries like India. There are lots of problems. But when you say, for instance, I come from Karnataka state, which heavily relies on agriculture. There is SMEs that trade on agricultural products. If we want to opt for hometown funding, how does this actually work? You say, you mentioned that you come up with a proposal and you put it on the internet. But what are these platforms where you convince that this is a great idea for hometown funding in various aspects of small-scale industries?
Thank you very much. When we are talking about hometown investment trust funds, in my presentation I also mentioned that this scheme is more suitable for micro or small projects because the funding is based on a small amount of money, in $100, $200. So another comment that I usually receive from many friends is that in Japan, savings rate is sufficient for this amount of money. However, as I mentioned, these projects are relying on a small amount of money. That is true. If we are talking about a larger size, for example, SME and so on, for the case of Japan, there is a credit guarantee scheme, CGS, credit guarantee schemes, that government is guaranteeing the lending to SME sector. So the credit guarantee schemes is also available in several other countries. However, for the case of Japan, for example, Japan has 4 million SME, almost 4 million SME. So when I talk about Japan, maybe most of you think that Japanese economy created by Toyota, by Panasonic, by Sony, and so on. However, even in Japan, 51% of the output GDP is from SME. 70% of labor force are working in small and medium-sized enterprises. And many of these SMEs, they have difficulties for accessing to finance because of asymmetry of information. So, for the case of Japan, Credit Guarantee Corporation, which are 51 Credit Guarantee Corporation, because Japan has 47 provinces, so in each province we have one Credit Guarantee Corporation and 4 Credit Guarantee Corporation or CGC in in each mega city. Government is guaranteeing 80% of the lending to SME. 80%. Why government is doing that? Because when I, as a SME owner, SME manager, I approach the bank asks for collateral. And in majority of the cases, SMEs don't have sufficient collateral to provide. So, if I, as a government, I don't solve, it means that 50% of my economy, they don't have access to finance. So, then SME approach to Credit Guarantee Corporation. What do they do? What do these Credit Guarantee Corporations do? Credit Guarantee Corporations, first of all, they are collecting information, data from this SME. The point that I have mentioned, assessment is very important. In Japan, before 1990s, lending to different companies, to SMEs, to large enterprises, was mainly based on real estate as a collateral, land as a collateral, because land is the most valuable asset. However, presently, lending is based on credit, is based on information, is based on assessment. I don't ask for collateral, I don't ask for real estate collateral. So these credit guarantee corporations, first of all, they collect information, data. They don't do the assessment by themselves. They collect that data, they collect the information in a nationwide credit database. That for the case of Japan, it's called CRD, Credit Risk Database. I used to work at CRD of Japan. I was economist at CRD of Japan. At CRD of Japan, we collect the data of these SMEs and we do credit rating of SMEs, credit scoring of SMEs. The same thing that large companies such as S&P, Moody's, Fitch are doing for large enterprises, CRD is doing credit scoring, credit risk assessment for SMEs. Then based on the credit assessment results, which will be ranked from 1 to 10. We tell Credit Guarantee Corporation that this SME is very risky. You shouldn't guarantee. Because if you guarantee and this SME is too much risky, it means it will be default. Or if we find out that the rating of this SME is very good, or the risk of it is very low, government will ask for very low premium from this SME. Because the risk is very low. So it means the premium that government or that CGC is asking from that SME, it is depending on the risk. And then after government receives this premium, government is guaranteed 80% of the lending. It is almost $2 million for each SME. So it means 1.6 million US dollar of this amount of loan is guaranteed by government. Then that SME go to bank. Banks see that 80% of the risk covered by government, only 20% risk. For that 20% risk, several banks, they do assessment by themselves. Then through this, the lending will be easier. And it's interesting to mention that from these 4 million SMEs in Japan, 1.6 million SMEs, they already received guarantee from this scheme.
Hi, I'm curious about the Hometown Investment Trust Fund. If I wanted to invest in those small-scale projects, do you have any specific website for that, or you have to go to the bank and say, hey, I want to invest to this company, like those funds that they invest in stock market to make it more listed?
Thank you for your question. And so, as I mentioned, FSA of Japan, Financial Service Agency of Japan, authorize some companies to be intermediate company. If you approach to FSA website, there is a list of a company, authorized company, that the website, everything. Then, if you go to website of that companies, that one of them is this music security, you will see bunch of projects. For example, a project for producing Apple, a project for generating clean energy in this region. Then when you click on each project, the full information will be there. One of the advantage of this scheme is clear access to information. You know that where your money is going, to which project, the background of that project owner, the rate of return of this project, everything is clear. So the clear information answering to the question that you asked is one of the tools that will make trust. Because if you don't bring information, it's not very clear, and then I cannot trust. But for this case, the clear information about the project progress, background of the project owner, everything is clear. Thank you very much. So, usually we shouldn't rely so much on governments. This is the most important thing, that because when we are looking about, when we are talking about different projects, government should support, government should do, but government shouldn't do anything. Government should supervise only. So, for this case, as I mentioned, these are not guaranteed. And again, if we increase the role of government and this project goes to default, bankruptcy, then investor expect government compensate. So government is just supervising that intermediate company. That intermediate company, they should report periodically, every quarter, they should report this project and so on. But that intermediate company is the decision maker. Assessment is by them. You see, government is doing some indirect supervision of this project. Role of that assessment is very important, because if that assessor is not qualified, then the default information is available. Then investors won't show interest for future investment. So for this case, I mentioned, for example, for this example company, default was less than 1%. Then I see this is qualified intermediate company. I trust this intermediate company. I don't know that hometown project so much, but that is a micro project. But when this intermediate company says that rate of return is 7%, is 8%, this is qualified and so on, I trust.
Thank you very much, Professor Farhan, for his insightful answer. On behalf of Faculty of Economics, Chiang Mai University, I would like to give thanks to Professor Farhan for his sacrifice his time for presentation to us.